Welcome everybody and thank you for tuning into tonight's work session. Work sessions are conducted to provide City Council with introductory information, opportunities to provide staff guidance, and to facilitate initial conversations on a topic. No votes are taken. As such, there's not an opportunity provided for members of the community to provide comments or ask questions in the work session. Those interested in providing comments to the council on any city-related topic are encouraged to participate in the community comment during the regular meetings itself. All right, up first tonight is the space study for the Fire Department and Public Services.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I want to also welcome Joel Dunning with Wold. It's not too often that an architect gets to present from a room that he's designed, so it's kind of a neat feature here. And welcome back to Joel. So in September of 2020, the City Council started talking about the need for storage in the Public Services building. We've talked about it for a number of years, but really haven't designed a program for it, meaning we don't have a square footage, we haven't assigned a cost. We have a placeholder in our long-term financial plan, the capital plan section, identifying it for a future year. But the number is kind of pick a number out of thin air based on kind of what we've seen. And so brought Wold in just based on our experience and the positive relationship that we had with them through the City Hall project. And in December, Joel and his team came out and talked about what the City Council might be looking for as far as a process. And before and after, Chad Shell, the Public Services Director, and Callie Trimble were involved since Fire Department also shares that space. And kind of looked at what the priorities for the council or objectives related to that. And I'm just going to run through those objectives because I think they're a significant part of why we're here tonight. Number one being the Public Services Department stores a significant amount of vehicles and equipment outside, and so the study wanted to kind of find a solution to facilitate the indoor storage of that. There's also several buildings throughout the city. The Public Utilities Building on Broadway and Main, the Lions Park Building, we also store equipment in there, and for those of you that have been around the city for a while, that used to be kind of the Public Works headquarters before Public Works and Public Utilities was merged. There's also equipment stored in the water treatment plant on Mount Hope Road, as well as the water tower by Mills Fleet Farm. And so looking for an opportunity to consolidate for efficiency of operation some of those services. Another piece, and I mentioned the 117 Broadway building, or what we always refer to as the old PU building, that is identified as a possible redevelopment opportunity. It's located in the downtown in the historic district. It's an industrial use, and the council has identified that redevelopment site of something in the city's strategic plan. Kind of another outgrowth of this this process is the fire department has identified a need to get their turnout gear out of the main apparatus bay at the fire station. There's some carcinogens involved with diesel exhaust and the smoke from the use of that turnout gear, and so industry trends are trending to get that turnout gear out of the apparatus bay, and Joel can get into that detail, or Callie if he's on the line, to talk about that specifically. And then the plan was to identify short and long-term solutions. Obviously, we have a short-term solution as identified in these previous objectives, but looking out, 15, 20, 30 years, can we use a site that we can build now and then add on into the future? And then finally, the council expressed a want and desire to have the redevelopment of, or the site that Public Services and the fire department would use on property currently owned by the city. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joel to talk about the process and where we are today.
This on already? It's good? Okay. Thank you for having me here. It's exciting to be back. Brent has a presentation pulled up on screen that I can go through. As was mentioned, we had a lot of meetings with Callie and with Chad and with Brent to understand what the needs were, to really define those space needs first, starting back in the fall. And as was mentioned, we did come before you in mid-December to present those needs. And so since then, we've been looking at how do we address those needs and what sort of facility solutions could provide for space and needed for the different equipment that was identified both in a short-term high priority and also a long-term master plan. So there's been a lot of back and forth. We always we figure it's a set amount of time to gather the input on the need, but figuring out the different options, we want to give time to explore as many options as possible and fine-tune things to make sure that we're getting the right solution for each one of our clients. So we did meet lots of times throughout the spring and have gotten to that point where we have, I think, agreement by the city and by the different parties on finding the right solution. On screen right now is a summary of the square footage. It's a little bit of a recap from our December meeting, but it's to remind you that the outcome was hoping to eliminate use of Lions Park and the downtown building. And so that column on the bottom right, you can see 0 usable square feet is shown there as the goal. That means still keeping some storage at the water treatment facility and the water tower, and then also creating some additional space. You can see that the existing 801 building kind of midway down the page, it's about 21,900 square feet today, and according to our programming of the long-term need, it was about 34,000, a little over 34,000 square feet of storage space that was needed. So quite a bit of a differential there to accommodate both the growth but also closing down those 2 existing facilities. So although we identified that long-term need, we know that short-term need is more important to get on the table. So we identified a recommendation that obviously the growth for 20, 30 years, the city's not going to need all the equipment and all the storage space right away. So one of our efforts since December was to hone that hone that master plan into a recommendation for today. And you can see that for the most part, all of the different categories of spaces are a reduction. Salt storage is about the only one that stays the same. It's the size facility you have now. It's the size of to accommodate the city. So keeping that salt storage shed the same is important. This is the existing site plan, just for familiarity. That salt storage is on the top left, northwest corner. The main building at the 801, Jonathan Carver, is really divided into 2 garage spaces. The north half is the public services vehicle bay, and the south half is the fire department bay. The middle area is a 2-level space that has fire department support in the lower level, some shared conferencing and toilets towards the front of the building. And then the upper level is a combination of public services office space and also some space used by the fire department for workspace, workout space, and just a variety of other fire department support. So our recommendation, just jumping right into it, is to build a public services storage bay facility on the back of the property, the west side of the property. Really, it's used for storage. That site is used for storage already, but it's open air. It's maybe it's in the public works world called a boneyard, where a lot of equipment is just left out there to age and weather. And enclosing that in a building will prolong the life of all the equipment that's stored there, along with providing more organization instead of just dropping it. Having a building with designated parking stalls gets a little bit more efficiency in storage and allows for a lot of the equipment that's off-site to be brought on-site. The salt storage remains where it is. There's a cell phone tower or a radio tower and an equipment building that's just off the east and south edge of that new blue square. That stays the same. So we're really siting the building so that it's close to the zoning setback. There is some land around the back to drive around the back, but really allowing the existing facilities to remain as is without needing to reconstruct or improve or change or move any of those existing facilities. The other component to this, besides that large storage capacity of that it's about 9,600 square foot building, you'll see there's an orange area at the south end of the fire department. That's an addition to the building, 1-story addition, that would house a vestibule at the far left end. A lot of the fire department staff will come in and the firefighters will park along that south curb line. and when there's a call, and then come into the building. Right now, the turnout gear, their equipment, personal equipment, is all stored just along racks on the wall, which means that every time those diesel engines fire up, that plume of exhaust goes out and coats the turnout gear that's there in that room. So this small addition would basically create a weather vestibule to get into the building, and then a long linear room that's basically the turnout gear storage, so that firefighters would come into the vestibule, take a right immediately, go into that locker room, go down to their locker storage area, put on their gear, and continue through the locker room and into the fire apparatus bay to get to the engine and then deploy to the emergency. That allows that equipment to stay clean and be healthier and a safer tool for the firefighters to wear. Other than that addition, there's really no work that we are recommending in this initial phase to the main building. But like was mentioned, we did want to study long-term. So I think the next slide does show, in case the city wants to continue and look at expanding this site, the concept that we developed to fit everything on this site is to expand that building on the west, so that it goes down pretty close to the south property line, and also build out a storage, a new salt storage, a little bit over the property line on the north end, possibly buying some property or looking into an agreement with the neighbor. But that allows for construction of a new public services office space at the north end of that building. And what that in turn does is frees up the entire existing building to be used for the fire department. So all of their long-term needs for future rigs and storage and everything, as well as office space, all fits in the existing building. So don't want to dwell on this, just showing that the 30-year growth that we had identified can all fit on this site, and we're not undoing anything that we're recommending the city consider in the short term. So going back to that short-term recommendation, as I mentioned earlier, it's about a 9,600 square foot building addition, and for public services, and about 820 square feet, I don't think I mentioned that, for the fire department on the south end. It does meet those short-term needs of the city that we had identified and worked through with Chad and Callie. And just to give you an idea, an important piece is always budget, the recommendation. So thanks, otherwise I wouldn't be able to remember the numbers without the pictures blocking them. The public services building itself is programming. Picture on the left is just to give you an visual of what it might look like. We just recently built a new public works storage building for Scott County down in Jordan, and escalating those costs, modifying the amount of site work that needs to be done, which is less on your site. We projected out to about $200 a square foot, 9,600 square feet. We get a construction cost of $1.9 million. There's always fees, testing equipment, other things that need to go along with it. So from a total project budgeting standpoint, we would recommend the city consider $2.3 million for that storage building. And then the fire department turnout gear, it's a much smaller construction, but that means less economy of scale. So we believe it's about a $425 a square foot construction cost. Gets you about a $350,000 construction cost for that addition. Throw in the soft costs and recommend budgeting about $420,000 for that addition. All of those are forecasted for about I think it was the year 2023, which aligns with the potential of having funds available. I guess we were informed there wouldn't be funding sooner necessarily, so those dollars are all 2023 construction dollars, just for information. I think that's the conclusion. I don't know if you're here, Callie, or Chad's on the screen, if either of you want to say anything about the process or the results.
I have nothing. That pretty much sums everything up.
We spent several months reviewing this plan when we looked at the fire side. It really makes sense for us to have the lockers on that side of the building because that's where we come in, that's where we respond to when we go to a call. That's why we're looking at a way to enclose an area to keep our turnout gear away from the diesel fuels. And in addition to that, our turnout gear, no matter how good you clean it, it still off gases. So that would keep the off gassing turnout gear in a separate area. You put in ventilation systems, so that would keep that area clean for us to breathe and stuff like that. Plus, get those harmful carcinogens out of the apparatus bay where we spend most of our time when we're training and stuff like that. So, we believe, Chad and Brent and I have all worked on this plan, and we believe this would be a good direction for us to go. As the fire department's not in immediate need for crucial larger space other than our turnout gear out of the apparatus bay.
So when I'm looking at the costs here, for the public services project, we're looking at $200 a square foot. And then when we go down to what is the locker room, we'll just call that, is $425 a square foot. Why is there such a huge difference in those prices per square foot?
It's generally the economy of scale. The picture of the Scott County Public Works building, that's a pre-engineered metal building with very minimal finishes in it. It's basically a large garage, essentially. So there's certainly heating and ventilation and electrical that goes into it, but not a lot of interior construction, and the exterior shell is pre-engineered by metal building companies that have kits ready and able to build. So that brings the overall cost per square foot down. The locker room addition is going to be a higher cost per square foot just because there's going to be excavation. An excavator has to come out, mobilize, but not dig too much for footings. The block or precast, whatever the structure ends up being, that person has to come out and mobilize, but they're not doing too much work. So there's a lot of extra overhead on a really small addition like that locker room addition that drives the cost up. If we were to be budgeting a brand new fire station like the size of the 801 building, we would recommend that closer to about $300 a square foot. So the bigger you get, the more efficient it is to build, the less overhead there is, and the more you can spread that overhead over all the square footage. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. And then, Kelly, you talked about having a ventilation system. Is that included in this project cost?
Yeah.
That's all I have right now.
Joy, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. I mean, I like having a plan to try to consolidate the public services equipment space into one facility and also freeing up the downtown facility for redevelopment. Those are some objectives we've been talking about, so I really like this plan for that. I guess, I don't know, maybe Brent, you're the right person to ask this question to. Can you speak a little bit to funding, if this is in the capital, what is this, capital equipment improvement plan? Capital improvement plan, thank you. How do we fund that?
Yep. So we are in the midst of starting our annual revision of our long-term financial plan and capital plan. So what we'd, pending the council's adoption of the study, we would take this number and then work with the council on designating a build year. So what you're doing is through the study is saying, yes, this is a reasonable budget. So the next really critical step then is identifying a year and how it fits within all the other critical infrastructure projects that you're contemplating over the next 5 years. And so that will be a critical piece. I asked Joel as a part of this process to plan for construction 2023 so that you don't immediately adopt a plan and then 6 months later the construction costs are higher than what we anticipated. And frankly, I think we all are aware of the high cost for construction right now as it relates to materials. And so even though the budget, for example, on the fire department says $420,000, it'll cost whatever the bids come in at. This provides us with, the budget of like, okay, this is what we can reasonably expect for a project like this. But depending upon when we do it and the economy at that time, there'll be some variables that we won't be able to anticipate. But we know the public services building we estimated at 1.5 million, but it was based on nothing. No, we didn't have a size, we didn't have a construction type now we have some real good hard data that we can have a conversation at the council level if you choose to, start talking to the community about it, and have some actual data to have a conversation rather than we need something but we're not really sure what and what it might cost. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so that helps me with that, but it made me think of another question. So the long-term recommendation that was presented with the larger public services bay, you know, essentially giving the fire department the entire existing structure that's there. Do we have an estimate on when we might need that? Is that a 10 years away? Is it a 15 years away, 20 years away?
I think we don't, is the simple answer.
We don't know. Okay.
And that's why you don't see a cost in there, because it's, and I'm sure if we asked Joel and Wolt to prepare one, they could, but, you know, that could be anywhere from 2035 to 2030, and there's just such wild swings in there.
Right.
And just because the city grows doesn't necessarily mean that we're gonna have a space need. I mean, I think if you walk through the public services into that building right now, and that's one of the things that we can do as a next step. I mean, it's literally like single file line in between that equipment. So I think getting some space will frankly last us quite a bit longer than, for example, I think we're at a point where whether it was city hall offices or public services, we'll have this kind of interim jump, but we're not gonna have to make this 30-year jump. I mean, because who knows what the city's gonna need in 30 years. City Hall's on a self-contained site. It's not gonna grow any larger, but we know it's gonna fit our needs for a long time. But to speculate where we might be for public services and that need would be, I think, very, very hard. It would just be that speculation.
Okay. All right.
All right. Lori? I have some questions on the turnout room, or I guess like an actual room for the turnout gear. And I like the idea. Just definitely seems like something that's kind of a concern, you know, or definitely something that's brought to our attention in the last, you know, I don't know what, maybe a year and a half or so. So the questions I have, and I don't expect answers, is are there other fire departments that are doing something like this? Is this, or, you know, we might just be kind of ahead of everyone else. It'd be interesting to see how it's working for them, what the cost was. And then the other question is, knowing that this is kind of a, you know, something that's, you know, more in front of us now, as far as awareness, is grant money. And if there's anything out there, I know this is early, you know, as we're just actually wanting to just do a study on it, but that would help too. This might be something where there could be some grant dollars.
We can definitely research both those items.
Okay.
I can speak from my experience that I know every new facility that we're designing, it's one of the highest criteria now for fire department, and a lot of almost every one of our fire department studies where we're doing something equivalent to this, the creation of a clean zone versus a hot zone within the building is the major impetus driving the project. There just have been, in the last 5 years or so, a lot of studies about firefighter safety and trying to research why there's a higher incidence of cancer and other issues with firefighters, and they've traced it back to exposure to carcinogens. And obviously going into a structure fire is something that can't be avoided, but there are ways to clean. We see a lot of our clients that they started adopting, you know, changing out of their turnout gear right at the scene of the fire, so that they're getting out of that smoke contaminated gear right away. Once it's clean, storing it in a clean area in the fire department. So it's definitely a trend that the last couple of years people have been paying a lot of attention to.
And I can speak to the council hasn't addressed this specifically, but this project would fit below what we're expecting to receive for the second round of CARES Act dollars. So something to consider. I know the council hasn't talked about how they want to spend those dollars, but it would fit within that kind of public safety realm of the, they're calling it the American Recovery Act dollars.
That was it. Questions?
Thank you. Chrissy? Sure, a couple more questions. And so I brought up the square foot question about the cost. Is that, if we do the lockers, maybe this is more of a Brent question, if we do the locker room and the public services bay, is that something that we can bid as one project as a whole to try and bring those mobilization costs down rather than doing it separately?
Yes.
I have another question about if the locker room is built to the south there. I know the firefighters do park along there. Can you fit a fire truck through there, or are we gonna need to add more parking stalls?
I believe we talked about pushing out that curb line a little bit, so we could still park vehicles there.
Okay. So this one is for Chad and Brent. So for the Lions Park building, I know we want to have down to 0 storage in there for right now. That building is on city property. We have it, so it can be used as backup. Is that the plan? We're not going to then tear it down or anything like that, are we? No.
No.
Okay.
I think what Joel was alluding to is rather than having, like, for example, a bunch of lawnmowers up there, it would be stuff that would be very seasonal,
Okay.
like storage, but you wouldn't necessarily store vehicles and equipment that would need to be serviced there. It would be
Sure. I get. Yeah.
pallet racking, etc.
Okay, that makes sense. I just thought, don't take away any space either, right?
You asked my question, thank you.
Yep. All right, that's all I have. Thanks.
Let's start out with public services and the extent, length for the new building that's being proposed here. Are we looking at that for, it's gonna have a 15-year useful life? 20-year useful life?
I would think it would be even longer than that.
Okay.
When you say useful life, you mean
Well,
useful
just that building with the 2 public services bays. If we're gonna just add 15 to 20 years on the one, and I'm looking at the other option for future growth, how much extra square footage is that, and what's that dollar amount?
I think that ends up being about another 7 or 8,000 square feet.
Okay,
And, proportionally, it's probably
another one
today another 1 million or 2 million, in that range. It's not quite the full size, so it's about 3/4 of that, of the 2.3 project cost.
So another 1.5.
Yep.
Okay, so for basically 4.5 million, we could have a full building, and we wouldn't have to put lockers in the lower side of the fire bay department, because the fire department would basically take over the whole building, correct? I'm looking out long range. If we're looking at 15 years for a building, and then in another 15 years, we need more space, and then we're gonna bang on another,
Is it your
3/4.
The turnout gear room is still needed because all the fire engines are on the south side of the building, so you couldn't store the turnout gear on the north end because they'd have to go through the entire building to get to the engines.
So in other words, it's a convenience factor to have it all right there and then run it in,
Correct.
okay? I'd be interested in finding out how much extra it would be to build one building once, store all of our stuff in one building from all throughout the city, and find out what those costs are, instead of, we'll piecemeal it. I don't like piecemeal. That number would make a lot of sense to me, because right now, the way I see this is we're gonna have part of our techs up in one building, other techs in another building. They're gonna be walking through the parking lot a lot instead of just being in one building. I think it would simplify life a lot for them, knowing that we have one building where we could have all the techs, all the trucks, all of the public services vehicles, our lawnmowers and everything under one roof. All the storage that we have right now, we can all move that under one roof. And if it's gonna be 1.6 million, if we're gonna spend 2.3, you know, another 1.6 just to get it all done today, so that way we're good for 30 years. Does that make sense? And then that way, we can always have the fire department, they can utilize that north side of the building for whatever other needs they might have, instead of just keeping them in that little area, confined area.
We can certainly have that number included in the final report.
That would be nice, because if we're gonna build it, let's build it once and build it right, instead of piecemealing it and in 10, 15 years coming back, and because then we're gonna have mobilization costs, we're gonna have different costs of scales. Materials are gonna be even higher then, and it's just gonna escalate the cost of the building. If we're gonna move forward and build a building, let's build it right. I mean, it's like City Hall, we built it right. And I wanna do things once and not piecemeal it. That's just my opinion. I think I like the plan, but I'd like to see expanded so that we can build one building and get everybody. I think if we build it once, we don't have to come back in another 15 years going, okay, well, we didn't build it big enough the first time. This way, it's always been a concern of, well, where we're gonna build the new fire department, where we're gonna build the new public services building, okay? That was always a concern. We knew it was coming. It wasn't if it was gonna come, it was when. And being laid out like this, it partially, to me, fills the need, but I think we're gonna have more of a need down the road. And I think just building it once and doing it right, that's my biggest concern.
Just so I don't shock you when we come back with a price, my quick off the cuff 1.5 to 2 million
Yep.
was to extend the vehicle area. That doesn't include the cost of the office space at the north end that would be built also. So that's going to add to that cost. So the dark blue that's at the north end is new office space for public
Okay,
services.
got it. Well, bring that number.
Yep,
Just,
you can do that.
just because, to me, putting them in one area and having their spot makes a lot more sense.
Just as one additional caveat to that is I don't know if Joel had that in his number, but we'll talk to him about, there's an existing stormwater pond or filtration system there.
Yep.
So that'll
Have to be mitigated.
have to be mitigated, so we'll have to get that, and we'd have to connect with our engineering team on getting a number for that too, so.
Okay, that's fair. Just put together a package for that and bring that number, because that, to me, that makes sense. That's all I got.
Just on that topic, that does not make sense to me. I'm not in favor of building more building than we need. I like that this building can grow with the city's needs, but just looking at all of the debt that we have with Jonathan Carver Parkway and City Hall, I'm not in favor of taking on more debt than what we need. And I like this plan because I think it really clearly shows how we can phase this out and how it can grow with us as a community. But I don't think we're there yet. And I don't certainly hope that Chad would agree, but I can't imagine that it's too much of an inconvenience just to walk between the two buildings, especially when we're essentially consolidating and going from 2 buildings and eliminating the old fire station downtown and making things a little bit more centrally located. My one thing, and I think a lot of the questions, thank you for asking the question about Lions Park, because that caught me as like, where's that going? And then I had questions about the HVAC too, but that was answered as well. My only other kind of comment on this is I would like to see, and to the point of what Brent said with the CARES Act money, I know it's not called CARES Act money this time around, but the second round of kind of COVID relief funding that we're getting, I would like to see the additions to the fire department for their lockers put on sooner rather than later. We talked in our strategic planning session about how the health and safety of our firefighters is so important, and I think that this is putting our money where our mouth is. I think that that's something that we could hopefully get done sooner rather than later and really pull the trigger on that and not wait until 2023 for that one. You know, this is something that's a known issue with firefighters. Callie was kind enough to kind of do a walk through the fire department with me, and I think it was probably during that like awful week in February where you guys had the overnight call that was so bitterly cold, and then like 3 other really big fires that week, and we were like, just go ahead, smell it. You can probably even smell through your mask. It smells like house fire in there. After, despite how clean the turnout gear is, it still smells. It's still off gases. So it's a thing, and if this thing is putting our firefighters at risk, I want to do whatever we can to eliminate that risk. And this would be a $420,000 solution, but if it'll keep our folks safe.
There's on the second build-out plan, there's another piece on the end of those lockers that says hose. What is that for?
In case the city wants to consider a hose tower, or the fire department wants to consider a hose tower in the future as part of the master plan, there are different ways of drying hoses. You can stretch them out horizontally and zigzag them on the wall. There are actual hose drying appliances that are akin to a clothes dryer, but for hoses. Or the reason that a lot of fire departments have a tall tower is they drape their hoses and let them drip dry down. So that's potential. These days we see hose towers used more for training actually on how to climb and rappel and other things like that than actually for drying hoses.
Okay. But that hose tower, that would not qualify under this funding that we're getting. There wouldn't be necessarily, it would. That would also fall.
Well, there's a webinar that we're planning to attend virtually, and it appears like there will be far less strings attached as far as how those funds are used. So we could, the hose tower wasn't identified as an immediate need as far as the phasing goes.
Okay.
But I do like where you're thinking of get that building done.
Well, once again, it'd be adding something onto it at a later date. If we have the funding that comes from what is it called again? I want to say CARES Act too.
I think it's American Recovery Act.
Okay, a Recovery Act. And that hose tower can be added in with the Recovery Act funds or be paid for by that, then I would be for it. If it's not, I would say maybe then we do, wait on it. But if it's something that could be included in with that lockers, that funding, then maybe we should go for that right away too.
So what I'm hearing is we just need a separate call out for what the hose tower would cost, Joel.
Okay.
Can we put you on the spot and say what your estimate would be?
And hold you to it. So.
And hold you to it.
Madam Mayor,
Fair enough.
I'm not discounting the plan as with the smaller public services bay, but I believe in doing our due diligence just to make sure that if it makes sense to build one building, we should absolutely look at it. So that way we can have a good plan for the next 30 years.
And just a point of clarification, the council in adopting the space study, you're not saying you're going to do one phase over the other phase. You're just saying that you support the ideas of like what they say the needs are, and then you're using that budget as a tool. You'll make that type of decision that Councilmember Henry and Councilmember Mock and Mayor Johnson are making during your long-term financial plan and the capital plan. What the scope is, what the year is, and how we plan for that financially. Good points is just you don't feel compelled to have to decide that tonight.
No. I think to know the numbers, to have a rough estimate of what that fully built out will be, I think is good information to have.
Yeah, there's no harm in getting the numbers. I just I'm not in favor of pulling the trigger on it. Anything from you, Joy, coming back? Just don't want to overlook you because you're.
No, I appreciate that. No, I have nothing else.
Okay. All right. Then I think we're ready to move on.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I think just based on schedule, if we could kick the pavement management plan to the regular meeting and then go with, I don't have anything on city manager's report, but to go to city council request with our meeting time.
Okay. Good suggestion. Thank you. Again, let's see. So moving on, we will do item number 3 during the meeting. Nothing from Brent for the city manager's report. Going on to council requests. For 3.1, after our last meeting, I was talking to Brent, and we were talking about the city attorney appointment process. Larry's about ready to ride off into the Florida sunset on July 1st, and I would like to come up with a plan on how we're going to figure out his replacement. So we talked about some options, and we talked about not an RFP, but
RFQ, request for qualifications.
Request for qualifications, which is essentially more of a targeted RFP where we have ideas of some folks, and I think that Brent has already been making some calls and kind of doing his research. So can you more eloquently talk through kind of what you envision this to be?
Well, I think there is kind of two tracks that you can go. One is to, Larry introduced Clarissa Volpe and to kind of have her kind of serve as the interim through the remainder of the year and decide whether or not you want to go for an RFP or Q, et cetera, or to have Clarissa and Melkert along with 3 to 4 other firms participate and have a kind of a city attorney in place probably by the end of the summer, September-ish. I've gotten some examples from other cities for processes, and I'm pretty confident that we could have a process. I'd bring a draft of a process to you at your next meeting, or you could go with the model where you have Melkert kind of fill in as the interim. You'd still have to appoint somebody. Larry is appointed through the council appointment process at your first meeting of the year. So that's the kind of feedback that I need to either start work or hold off at this point.
And the way I'm looking at it is it's nothing against Melkert, but I think we have this opportunity to kind of see what else is out there, and I think it's time that we just kind of see what our options are. I also think it's really important in the process that we certainly interview the folks, but I would want Brent and Aaron and everybody who's on staff who's really, really, really doing the work with the attorneys to make sure that we get their sign off and that there's a comfort level with whoever they want. They kind of do almost like the first round of interviews, and if somebody doesn't make Brent's tummy feel right, that he doesn't pass them along to the second round. Because we can sit here and interview somebody, but I'm not sure that we necessarily are experts in this area, nor will we be seeing them more than twice a month tops. So with that, does anyone have a preference on the two routes that Brent laid out?
I agree. I think it's time with Larry retiring to take a look and see who might be out there and to look for those qualifications and those people. And we may end up with the same firm, we may end up with a different one, but I think, again, now, Larry, we're very sad that you're leaving us, but you are leaving us, so I think now's the time. Now's the time to take a look. So.
I don't have a strong preference, so I don't care if I come to a consensus, but if the majority's good enough that this is an opportunity to take a fresh look, and we can space sensible. I do have one clarifying question. When you say Belford, is that the attorney's last name? You refer to the name of the firm?
What's the name of the firm?
Yes, I know that. Okay. I didn't know if her last name was listed. Who's the intern?
Clarissa Volpe.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Joy?
Yeah, I don't really have a strong preference. I do appreciate, Courtney, your comments about the interviewing process if we do move forward that route, and making sure that staff vets candidates kind of before the council sees them. So I appreciate that comment as well. I support using somebody temporarily. I support, also going out and taking a look.
And to be clear, because it is our last meeting in May, and Larry's walking away from us at the end of June, we are going to have somebody in place temporarily. So, but I'm advocating for kind of moving forward sooner rather than later. Glenn?
Okay.
Larry, I really appreciate all the work you've done for the city over the years. You've done a lot of work, and I really thank you. with that being said, I think we should look into do our due diligence and see what's out there, see what other firms offer their services, and we can look at it. I mean, like I said, we're going to have an interim person, so let's just do our due diligence. It is what it is.
All right.
So let's just look into it.
Okay, so I hear three of us saying.
Yep.
go ahead.
So I'll prepare a draft RFQ and process, and then bring that to your next meeting in June for adoption.
Great, thank you. Lori, you're up next, but just in the interest of time, is it going to take more than 5 minutes? I don't want to rush you. We can hold it until the next meeting too. Okay, a minute.
I know, kind of surprised myself that I won't.
And go.
Because I don't have any questions for myself to answer, but just like more like thoughts, like something to put in your, give you something to think about. Is I had the opportunity to chat with Mrs. Aaron Smith, our city planner, this past week, and I asked her about the bridge on Jonathan Carver Parkway going over 212. And when that stuff's being redone, the bridge will have on the side where there is already a railing, because there's the path.
West side.
So it's the west side, when you're driving north-south, will have a sign that says Carver. So I had asked, what about the other side? Just because in some cities, I see it on both, sometimes I see it on one, and I'm not, my concern isn't that it's about consistency, it's just that I really want us to promote our city, and if that project is separate than Design Carver, but just to know, like, there's my exit for Carver. Oh, well, this is Carver. Yes, I drove by Carver, drove through, drove under, but I was by Carver. But I don't want to have it only on one side, just because that's where the railing is, so like, it makes sense to have it there. I would like to find out what it would cost to have it on both sides, just from a,
Branding.
Branding, thank you. Yeah, that's the word. Just from a branding. So that was my idea, or something to bring up. But we would need to give direction to have the engineers at least give us an idea of what that cost would be. I would be comfortable with the city paying for it, because I don't think the county would. I don't. I'm willing to ask them, but so that would probably be my question then.
It'd be Carver,
That's-
so
yeah.
it'd be Carver County. I guess
Yeah,
we
we
could
could
ask
maybe
the
do
county
their
for
font,
funds for
but so
that.
that's the thing I
2/3.
wanted to bring up. Yeah, where this would be our time to decide, do we want that, and then find out what the cost is, and then make a decision after that.
I remember talking about this, and I feel the same way. I feel like we get more traffic coming out than we do coming in, so for me it makes sense to have it on that east side of the bridge. But do you have an idea of what that would cost roughly?
Dan?
Sorry, yeah.
It's not like Zoom anymore.
Dan, you have 60 seconds
We
to
couldn't
answer
hear
this
you.
question.
Sitting up in the chair, the microphone right in front of me, but yeah, I would say my gut level is 50 to 100. But again, that's without doing some of the calcs on the existing railing condition and things that MnDOT's gonna make us fix if we touch it, so.
And what it means is that we need an entirely new high railing on that side to put something in the center of it.
Yeah, the railing, I would say, is at least 50. It's everything else that comes along with touching a bridge that starts to get the numbers up, so.
Dan, can you just briefly explain that? Because you'd have to go through MnDOT. Can you touch on that with the council?
Yeah, the first thing you have to do is, basically explain what you're trying to accomplish to make sure that even allow it day one to have a railing on a side that doesn't have a walkway. Because that's usually what the railings are there for, is where the walks are. They put the railing up for protection. So to start with that, is it feasible? And then you go down the path of, is there any limitations with the railing itself to take a fence? So you just have to do a little bit of investigation on feasibility, and then at that point, it's just costing it out. Once you get to that point, we'll probably be able to tell you that it's just permitting and time.
There will be one on the west side, correct?
Yeah, on the west. But that's where the trail is, so.
When they did the overpass over 11, is that the reason that we didn't have it on both sides? I remember talking about this, and it was.
Like originally the railing?
Yeah, I mean, because we fought to get the Carver on the westbound side, right, or on the west side.
No, they're okay with putting the medallion on. the railing was put on with the initial 212 project.
Right.
There's no trail on the east side, so the grade
Yep.
is lower.
Right,
wasn't
no,
sure.
yep, I understand that, but
I wasn't here for like when that overpass was originally constructed, so I can't speak to that.
Okay.
Is that what you're asking?
it's triggering something in my memory,
Oh.
but, with only a minute left here, I may not be able to get where I need to be, so I'll just stop there.
I think if the what I'm looking for, what we need is if the council just says, okay, Dan, go ahead and prepare something and bring it back to a future meeting.
In the interest of time, is anyone against giving Dan the direction to prepare something and bring back? I see Lori, or Joy shaking her head. Lori apparently is definitely for it. And I see nobody else shaking their heads. So consider yourself authorized to figure out.
Talk to the state and see what they have to say about it first.
We'll let you know what you're up against on
Yep.
cost and feasibility. It should be pretty quick and simple, so.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. All right. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Henry,
I'll second.
a second by Councilmember Sayer. We don't have to discuss this. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. We'll see you back in 9 minutes.